Good morning, everyone. Some news overnight. Former Vice President Dick Cheney is resting in a Virginia hospital this morning after receiving a heart transplant yesterday. The 71-year-old, who had suffered 5 heart attacks, had been on the transplant waiting list for almost 2 years, and his initial prognosis is good. And in the presidential race, Rick Santorum riding high this morning after bowling a turkey in Wisconsin and winning big in yesterday's Louisiana primary.
A very clear and crisp statement, and that is that you don't believe, as the pundits have said, that this race is over. You didn't get the memo. We're still here. We're still fighting.
But even with his 11 wins in this nomination battle, Santorum is way behind in the delegate race. Mitt Romney in a commanding position with more delegates than all his rivals combined. After his win in Illinois on Tuesday, Romney's the only candidate who can wrap up the nomination before the convention. What does this all mean for the race against President Obama? Let's begin with that and the president's top strategist, David Plouffe. Good morning, Mr. Plouffe. Morning, George. So hearing Rick Santorum say he's going to keep on fighting must be music to your ears. I know you and the president, your whole campaign, think this whole process is helping the president's chances. But our latest poll shows that President Obama is in a dead heat with Mitt Romney, despite the fact that this process has been going on so long. If this process is so grinding for Republicans, why is Mitt Romney tied with the president?
Well, George, you know, at the White House, we're focused on doing everything we can to help strengthen the economy and create jobs and develop the kind of clean energy future we need. In terms of the campaign, we believed all along this is going to be a very close election. Presidential elections generally are. You know, we won what was considered to be a huge victory in 2008, and we only got 53% of the vote. So this is going to be a close election. That really isn't going to change. It was true last month. It'll be true next month. It'll be true in November.
But you're planning for Mitt Romney, right?
Well, listen, that race has had a lot of twists and turns. Rick Santorum had another big win last night. Obviously, Romney, as you mentioned previously, has a big delegate lead. So what I know is at some point, whether it's next month or May or June or August, at some point we're going to have an opponent. We'll be ready for that. And we'll be ready to make our case for the American people about why this president deserves another 4 years and about why we can't go back to the same policies that led to the Great Recession.
It's also pretty clear that one of the planks in your campaign is going to be this budget proposed by Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan. It has been endorsed by Mitt Romney, endorsed and backed by most of the Republican candidates throughout the course of this year. But Paul Ryan, when he introduced it, went on offense this week. Take a look.
Medicare, under the president's law, raids $500 billion from Medicare to spend on his new health care proposal. We're saying get rid of the rationing board, stop the raid, and preserve the system.
Sounds like they're willing to take this fight on Medicare.
Well, George, if Mitt Romney is the nominee, then this really is going to be the Romney-Ryan plan. He said he's going to rubber stamp it. In fact, it's interesting. Grover Norquist, who's kind of the modern puppeteer of the Republican Party, said really what they need in a president is just somebody with enough digits to sign legislation. So the American people have to understand, if Mitt Romney is elected president, he'll rubber stamp that budget. And here's what that budget is. It fails the standard, it fails the test of balance and fairness and shared responsibility. It showers huge additional tax cuts on the wealthy that are paid for by veterans and seniors in the middle class. So it's not a balanced approach. It asks nothing of the wealthiest. In fact, it showers them with more tax cuts. It devastates things like education. And it voucherizes Medicare, which really would threaten that program and threaten our seniors. So the president's approach is the right approach. It's the balanced approach. And by the way, it's the approach that, whether it's the Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson Commission, Domenici-Rivlin, anybody out there that's offered a deficit reduction plan, any expert says it's got to have balance, which means it's got to cut spending. And we've already cut a lot of spending, almost $2 trillion. It's got to reform entitlements in the right way. And you've got to get revenue through tax reform. The Ryan plan, the Romney-Ryan plan, doesn't do any of that. All it does is drastically cut kind of indiscriminately in areas that will help the economy and showers the wealthy with big tax cuts.
You mentioned the Simpson-Bowles plan. As you know, the president taking some heat for not fully embracing that plan by many of his critics. And the Senate Democrats haven't even come forward with a budget for years.
Well, listen, on Simpson-Bowles, you know, there was a lot of elements of that ended up in the president's deficit reduction plan. So a lot of the ideas in there were derivative of that. Now, we did have some issues with that. We thought the Social Security cuts were too deep. It didn't guarantee protection of the middle class in terms of tax increases. I do get a kick, George. You see these Republicans saying, if only the president had supported Simpson-Bowles. that had $2 trillion in tax increases, more than the president's revenue. It had more defense cuts than the sequester that they're so upset about. So it's preposterous to think that somehow there's some storyline out there. These guys, ask each of them, do you support $2 trillion in revenue? No. Do you support additional defense cuts? So, but what we do need is Simpson-Bowles was the spirit of what we need. And they made a great contribution with their proposal, which is we need a balanced approach that has revenue, particularly from the wealthy through tax reform, more cuts. We've done a lot already. We can do a little bit more in terms of spending. And then obviously entitlement reform.
Let's talk about health care. Unprecedented 3 days of arguments before the Supreme Court on President Obama's health care law this week. And the public seems to be going into this fight before the Supreme Court very negative on the president's plan. We have our latest ABC poll showing that 52% of the American public now opposes the president's law. 25% want the Supreme Court to strike down that individual mandate, the requirement to buy health insurance. 42% want the Supreme Court to scrap the law altogether. 2 years after its passage, why haven't you been able to bring the public along on health care?
Well, first, George, you see a lot of polls on this issue, as do I. Polls also show that people don't want to go refight this political battle again. What they want us to do is implement the law smartly, make adjustments where we must, like giving states more flexibility to implement this. But most of the law doesn't take effect till 2014. We've had hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda spent against it. Now, you are beginning to see parts of the law come into effect. Kids between 21 and 26, over 2 million of them now have health insurance. They can stay on their parents' plan because of the health care reform law. You've got over 5 million seniors now getting $600 roughly of prescription drug assistance. Women now are treated equally as men in our healthcare system. Free preventive cares like mammograms and cancer screenings. So we just have to tell the story of this. One thing I'm confident of is by the end of this decade, we're going to be very glad the Republicans termed this Obamacare, because when the reality of healthcare is in place, it's going to be nothing like the kind of fear-mongering that was done. Now, as it relates to the Supreme Court, we're confident that it's going to be upheld. You had Democratic and Republican jurists upheld it in lower court decisions, including 2 very prominent conservative jurists. The mandate is an idea supported by the Heritage Foundation, Newt Gingrich, Bob Dole, most famously kind of the godfather of the mandate, Mitt Romney. So we're confident that it will be upheld. Okay, let me turn to the issue of gay marriage. The chairman of your convention, Mayor Villaraigosa of Los Angeles, Nancy Pelosi, Democratic leader in the House, 22 senators have all come out for a plank in the Democratic platform supporting gay marriage. I want to show the first sentence right there. It says, the Democratic Party supports the full inclusion of all families in the life of our nation with equal respect, responsibility, and protection under the law, including the freedom to marry. Now, the president has said he's evolving on the issue of gay marriage, but he's still opposed. Does that mean that he's going to fight the inclusion of this plank in the Democratic platform? Well, as you said, the president has spoke to this issue. I certainly don't have anything to add to that today. We don't even have a platform committee yet, much less a platform. Well, you do have a draft plank right there. Well, we're going to work through the platform process. Here, what I think is important. What is going to be in the Republican platform, if they're consistent with what their presidential candidates have said, is to reinstitute Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to defend aggressively the Defense of Marriage Act. On the other side, you have the president, who's had groundbreaking progress for gays and lesbians in this country. So I think there's going to be a big difference on these issues of fairness and equality. And obviously, the platform process will play out in the coming months. But why can't he say what he believes on this issue? Well, George, he has said what he believed. As he said, it's a very, this is a very important issue. It's a profound issue. He's spoken to this, with great detail. I don't have anything to add to that. I'm very proud, and he's very proud of what he's accomplished in terms of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, in terms of not defending Defense of Marriage Act, in terms of some of the benefits we're making sure federal employees of same-sex partners get. So I think he's spoken, not just spoken to, but he's delivered some really important victories in terms of fairness for gays and lesbians in this country. The president also spoke out this week on this horrible killing in Florida of Trayvon Martin, the young man, and it's raised such a debate all across the country. When the president on Friday came out and said, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, Newt Gingrich took exception. Listen.
What the president said, in a sense, is disgraceful. It's not a question of who that young man looked like. Any young American of any ethnic background should be safe, period. We should all be horrified, no matter what the ethnic background. Is the president suggesting that if it had been a white who'd been shot, that would be okay because it wouldn't look like him? That's just nonsense. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, the president spoke out, I thought, very powerfully. And in fact, there's been broad agreement almost universal agreement, including the people running for president, that there ought to be a thorough investigation of this. Those comments are reprehensible. And, Speaker Gingrich is clearly in the last throes of his political career. And, you can make a decision whether to go out with some shred of dignity or say these irresponsible, reckless things. And he's clearly chosen the latter path, and that's unfortunate for the country.
The president did say that we all need to go through some soul searching right now. Do you and does he believe that these stand your ground laws that are now in place in about 20 states should be revised?
Well, I think what he spoke to on Friday, his focus is, first of all, obviously on the tragedy of losing a young person, any young person, no matter the gender, the race. It's a tragedy for the country. And obviously to make sure a thorough investigation is done, both at the local level and the federal level. There's going to be time, as he said, we need to reflect on this incident. Looking at the laws will be part of that. But right now, our focus ought to be on sympathy for the family and then making sure an investigation is done thoroughly. And there seems to be, agreement on that across the partisan divide. You have Democrats and Republicans, independents, everybody saying, let's look into this. And I think that's what's going to happen.
David Plouffe, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thanks, George.